Hello everyone. My name is Liz Roman, and my presentation today is going to be on the BRCA gene and mutation plus the cancers that it causes. So, first of all, what is the BRCA gene and mutation? So, the abbreviation BRCA stands for breast cancer gene, and there are two types of this gene, BRCA1 and BRCA2, which impact the people's chances of developing cancer. So, you would think just by the name it's simple mutation in genes, but actually everybody has these BRCA genes and they do not cause cancer. Their main job is actually to prevent it. So as we get older, new cells are being made every day and DNA is constantly being replicated and it's not always going to be perfect or exact. And sometimes there is DNA pieces missing. And in this case, this is when telomeres cap off the chromosomes and fill in those gaps. So this is similar to what happens to the BRCA gene because it helps repair DNA that is already broken, which unfortunately can lead to uncontrolled replication of cells. And this causes tumors. So in the case that there is a mutation in the BRCA gene, the tumor suppressor genes do not work. So that's why we have the replication of many cells and then you have a tumor. So how many people have this mutation? A small amount of people carry the mutated BRCA1 and 2 genes, but specifically in numbers, 1 out of 400 or 0.25% of the population. But what are the risks when having this gene? So BRCA1 outcomes, it is estimated that about 55 to 65% of women will develop breast cancer before the age of 70, whereas with BRCA2 outcomes, about 45% of people will develop breast cancer by the age of 70. So with cancer, women with both BRCA mutations develop cancer at a higher rate and have a higher chance of having a second cancer. Like, let's say you have breast cancer once, you could develop a different kind of cancer, or you could have a reoccurrence of the same cancer. So, with breast cancer, there are many reoccurrences that are very common. And with the BRCA1 gene, it is mostly more of the time triple negative breast cancer, which is a lot more aggressive and more difficult to treat, unfortunately. So, what are the differences between these two genes and mutations? So, the BRCA genes are two entirely separate genes. And actually, the BRCA1 gene was identified in 1990 on chromosome 17, while BRCA2 was identified in 1994 and is on an entirely different chromosome, specifically chromosome 13. So, both mutations increase the risk of ovarian and pancreatic cancer. BRCA1 also increases the likelihood of cervical uterine colon cancer, while BRCA2 can increase the likelihood of stomach, gallbladder, bile duct cancer plus melanoma. So BRCA1 is estrogen receptor negative, progesterone receptor negative, and HER2 new negative, and whereas BRCA2 is generally just estrogen receptor positive. So we can see that BRCA1 has a lot of different receptors, and that's why it's the main reason that most people with the BRCA1 mutation tend to get triple negative cancer. But both of these genes do not skip generation, so it is very easy to inherit this mutation from a parent if the parent already has it. So how can we use modern medicine in genetic mutations? So gene editing or gene splicing, whatever you want to call it, has been a very advancing form of treatment for many different genetic diseases, especially helping in the early stages of embryo development in fertility clinics, because you are able to isolate different parts of the cell very early on in the development and growth. So the most common gene editing method is CRISPR. So it involves using an enzyme called nuclease, which acts as the little scissors of DNA. So you cut different parts of the DNA that you want to edit, but unfortunately, it may have some unintended effects and can cause other mutations as well. But this is done introducing unharmed DNA, and so the cells can accept it and replicate new and healthy DNA without mutation. So immunotherapy and gene editing. So they kind of coincide together because they're both very new forms of cancer treatment, but they kind of have the same idea, just having your own body do its own thing and fix things in the body. So they're both targeted to mutations, which what cancer is, and they're both great options for treatment, although considered kind of entirely experimental because it just replaces faulty genes. Immunotherapy, on the other hand, also just stimulates the body's defenses so that the body can recognize cancer cells and kill them through a process like apoptosis. So this diagram on the side is a little diagram of how CRISPR works, where a strand of RNA is introduced into what was spliced in a DNA, and then a sister side of the strand is produced. Like if you have a strand that's AUCG, then the coinciding nucleotides will go in and fill in. So what causes the BRCA mutation? Seed oils. It's not what you would think, actually. And a healthy diet, I'm sure we've all heard, is a leading factor to a lot of the diseases that we have today. And it causes a lot of mutations, but it is true, oils do cause a lot of mutations, and most of the oils in processed foods that we consume on an everyday basis or even cooking at home daily, specifically vegetable oils, because it intensifies the BRCA1 mutation. This is caused by the repeated heating of the oils, which enhance the oxidative degradation to produce polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which disrupt redox reactions and the balances in the body. So basically, a redox reaction, you lose an electron in your body. So this in turn produces proto-oncogenes, which changes the gene expression, where in a normal cell it would produce a malignant neoplastic cell. So when this happens, the depending on what gene you're looking at, when a proto-oncogene is produced, it will change the gene expression of a specific set of gene, and let's say the BRCA gene, it is now mutated because of this oxidative degradation. So in conclusion, the reason I chose this topic is because genetics are a big part of modern medicine, which are creating advances in cancer and other genetic diseases like cleft lip and palate, which I personally am very interested in, which it can be caught in the early stages of embryo development, and it's something that is very new, especially in fertility clinics, which we can look at and identify different mutations and diseases and things like Down syndrome, where we can change these different DNA strands just by splicing DNA and produce a genetically exact and healthy DNA, which the embryo and fetus can then replicate. And in the long run, the not just the BRCA gene can cause cancer, but as well, we also need to take into account for what we're putting in our body, because seed oils, for example, can harm DNA in the nucleus and in the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is a very important part of the cell because it regulates how old we are and what proteins are being produced in the body. But that's all I have. These are all the sources are used if you guys are interested in looking at anything that I mentioned. But that is it. Thank you.